Migrants are fleeing to Ireland for fear of being deported to Rwanda in Great Britain. A British MP said the deterrence was working that way. Because of the risk of being deported from Great Britain to Rwanda, irregular migrants are increasingly moving to Ireland. The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's controversial policies are already having an impact on the EU country. The Irish Foreign Minister Micheál Martin told the British newspaper Daily Telegraph, "Asylum seekers would seek refuge here and within the European Union to avoid deportation to Rwanda. About 80% of migrants come to Ireland via the British province of Northern Ireland," said Martin. And after Brexit, Great Britain and the EU agreed to leave this border open in order to avoid new conflicts in the former Civil War region. The Conservative British MP Marco Longhi told the Telegraph that the Irish figures showed that the deterrent was working. Social tensions in Ireland had recently increased due to increasing immigration. Between May 22 and April 23, more than 140,000 people arrived on the island, more than in 16 years. And right-wing politicians claim that migration is exacerbating the acute housing crisis, and there are repeated protests from residents. Last Tuesday night, the British Parliament passed a law declaring Rwanda a safe third country. And this allows the Conservative government in London to deport asylum seekers who arrived irregularly, then to the East African country, and they should apply for asylum there. And there are no plans to return them to Great Britain. Human rights activists see this as a violation of international obligations. The Irish government had also criticized the project. And French President Emmanuel Macron spoke of a geopolitics of cynicism. If migrants land in England, they should be deported to Rwanda now. And Prime Minister Sunak is now securing his project legally, and it's highly controversial. The British government cannot be dissuaded from its plan to deport migrants to Rwanda, regardless of their actual origin. In Parliament, after much resistance, the upper house also approved a bill last week, Tuesday night, and now King Charles still had to bring the law into force with his signature. There are a lot of questions still about all of this. But who really does the British government want to deport? The British government basically wants to deport migrants who come to the country irregularly, that means without the necessary papers, to Rwanda, no matter where they actually come from or what their personal circumstances are. And the people should then apply for asylum there so that if in doubt, they can stay in Rwanda. And as I said, there are no plans to bring them to Britain ever again. But why is Rwanda participating? According to commentators, the authoritarian leadership in Kigali hopes to be perceived as a reliable partner of the West, also in order not to raise concerns about human rights. Great Britain is also paying the East African country a sum of millions for the deal. And this is a point of criticism that opponents of the agreement repeatedly raise, because the British government is spending a lot of money, but it's not even clear whether a plane will actually take off. But how much do the British pay Rwanda in the end? According to the estimates by the Court of Auditors in London, the government will pay up to £500 million. And there could also be hundreds of thousands of pounds per asylum seeker. Opposition Labour MP Neil Cole recently quipped in Parliament, "Is the Secretary of State aware that Virgin Atlantic can send 6 people into space for less money than the government is willing to spend to send one person to Rwanda?" There is debate not only about the costs, but also about whether one should even go that far. The Supreme Court in London declared the project illegal. But what were the judges criticizing about the project? The court made it clear that it does not view Rwanda as a safe third country, and complained that it was not guaranteed that people there would receive a fair asylum procedure. And the Supreme Court cited reports from the UN Refugee Agency and previous British information about extrajudicial executions, deaths in custody, torture, and a high level of rejection of asylum applications from conflict areas such as Syria. But Prime Minister Rishi Sunak ignores this, and with the new legislation, Rwanda was declared a safe state with a stroke of a pen. And this is intended to prevent objections in British courts in the future. But if there is so much criticism, why are the British doing this? And it's mainly a political stunt. Prime Minister Sunak of the Conservative Tories has promised a tough course in migration policy. His catchphrase is "stop the boats," which means he wants to stop the inflatable boats that people use to cross the English Channel. In 2023, there were almost 30,000, and from January to March 2024, there were more than 4,600. That's more than ever in a first quarter. And State Secretary Michael Tomlinson defended the plans as an important way to protect borders and deter migrants from making the dangerous crossing, as people repeatedly drown trying. Many Conservative politicians are hoping that the tough course will generate more support in the coming elections, which are scheduled to take place at some time this year. But here in Germany too, reference is sometimes made to the British Rwanda plans. But what exactly is being discussed here in Germany? In Germany, calls for a Rwanda model come primarily from the Christian Democrats and the Liberals, and rejection comes from the Greens, and the Social Democrats are also skeptical. Chancellor Olaf Scholz from the Social Democrats and the heads of government of the federal states agreed in November that the federal government would examine whether asylum procedures were possible outside of Europe. A result should be available by June. What has so far been controversial is whether this could actually be about sending people from Germany to another country for their asylum procedure, or just about enabling them to undergo an asylum procedure there on their way to Europe. It's unclear whether it could ultimately even be an option to deny asylum seekers entry to Germany despite a legitimate reason. That would correspond to the regulation that Great Britain wants to implement with Rwanda. But there will be one big difference. But will Sunak's plan to win voters work? In principle, success in Parliament should give the Prime Minister a boost. However, Sunak's Conservative Party has been well behind Labour in opinion polls for months now. The reasons for this are numerous. After 14 years of Tory government, many Brits are simply fed up with the party. Commentators therefore do not expect that deportations to Rwanda will help turn the tide, and Sunak has put himself under a lot of pressure here. It will be a success when the boats are stopped, meaning no more migrants come across the English Channel. But how quickly will the flights happen now? Sunak had long hoped that a deportation flight would take off to Rwanda in the spring. Last Monday, however, he spoke of 10 to 12 weeks after the law came into force. And according to Sunak, there is a contract with a commercial provider so that the government does not have to rely on Royal Air Force aircraft. An airport would also be available. And according to the Daily Express newspaper, be careful, there are also considerations about flying asylum seekers out to Rwanda in advance on regular flights. The Times newspaper reported that Sunak's government wanted to explore similar agreements with Armenia, Ivory Coast, Costa Rica, and Botswana. The case could also lead to renewed conflict with the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, and Sunak has said he wants to ignore injunctions from the foreign court, which is bullshit, by the way, with the foreign court. Hardliners demand withdrawal from the ECTHR anyway. The Archbishop of Canterbury warns of a loss of reputation in the world in view of the plan with Rwanda. The UK should lead internationally as it has done in the past, not stand on the sidelines, was said by Justin Welby. Taking only some of the requirements of international law into account undermines their global reputation. But Sunak said on Monday that he had no doubt that the law would be passed through Parliament, and then it happened. He had previously said the government would force Parliament to sit as long as necessary until Tuesday night to approve the law. No ifs and buts. These flights are going to Rwanda, is what Sunak said at a press conference on Monday before the vote. The deportation flights of asylum seekers to the East African country would begin in 10 to 12 weeks, as I said. That's what he said shortly before the start of the crucial vote in the upper house. we are ready, the plans are in place, and these flights will definitely take off. I just want to make one point clear about the differences with what is discussed in Germany and what's happening with the Rwanda plans. In Germany and in the EU as a whole, there are discussions about asylum procedures in third countries, with a goal to sort all asylum seekers into those with legitimate asylum claims and people who are just trying to get into the EU for other reasons. But those with legitimate claims would be left into the EU, or would be let into the EU. And there's the big difference. Nobody that's sent to Rwanda will ever set foot into Great Britain again. The people who would be in those third country, what do you call asylum processing sites or whatever, they would be sorted there. The ones that have no claims will be rejected, and no people with asylum, legitimate asylum claims, legitimate war refugees, they would still enter the EU. And that is the big difference in both discussions. I just realized I didn't make that clear enough on that point. That's why I wanted to put it in the end as well. And that changes the whole thing with the talk about the legitimacy under international law. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.